Kunjabihari. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari. Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari. Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yasodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivartikacharya Asacharya Satyashri Srimati Divine Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Mathura Dhama Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya. Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sanyavadi Paskatyade Satarane. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpachubhascha Kripa Sindhavyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's March 5th, 2024 in New Dwarka in Los Angeles. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 22, Text 5. Tavasa darshanadeva Chinname sarva samshaya Yat swayam bhagavan pritya Dharmam aha rirakshisho. Please chant. Yat swayam bhagavan pritya Dharma maharirakṣisho Tava sandarshinameva Nirmarva samshaya Yat swayam bhagavan pritya Dharma maharirakṣisho. Any ladies? Tava sandarshanadeva Chiname sarva samshaya Yat swayam bhagavan pritya Dharma maharirakṣisho. Tava sandarshanadeva Chiname sarva samshaya Yat swayam bhagavan pritya Dharma maharirakṣisho. Tava, your, sandarshanat, by sight, eva, only, chinaha, resolved, me, my, sarva samshayaha, all doubts, yat, inasmuch as, swayam, personally, Bhagavan, your lordships, pritya, lovingly, dharmam, duty, aha, explained, rirakṣisho, of a king anxious to protect his subjects. Srila Prabhupada's translation. So this is Swayambhuva Manu speaking to Kardama Muni. Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you, for your lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Manu described herewith the result of seeing a great saintly person. Lord Chaitanya said that one should always try to associate with saintly persons, because if one establishes a proper association with a saintly person, even for a moment, one attains all perfection. Somehow or other, if one meets a saintly person and achieves his favor, then the entire mission of one's human life is fulfilled. In our personal experience, we have actual proof of this statement of Manu. Once we had the opportunity to meet Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and on first sight, he requested this humble self to preach his message in the Western countries. That's why we have the pranam mantra, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesu Sunyavani Paskachade Shatarane, the servant of Saraswati who's preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission in the Western countries, defeating impersonalism and voidism. There was no preparation for this. Oh, interesting, Prabhupada says that. There was no preparation for this. Does he mean that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur didn't prepare him, or that he wasn't prepared himself? But somehow or other, he desired it. And by his grace, we are now engaged in executing his order, which has given us a transcendental occupation and has saved and liberated us from the occupation of material activities. Thus, it is actually a fact that if one meets a saintly person completely engaged in transcendental duties and achieves his favor, then one's life's mission becomes complete. What is not possible to achieve in thousands of lives can be achieved in one moment if there is an opportunity to meet a saintly person. It is therefore enjoined in Vedic literature that one should always try to associate with saintly persons and try to disassociate oneself from the common man, because by one word of a saintly person, one can be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person has the power, because of his spiritual advancement, to give immediate liberation to the conditioned soul. Here Manu admits that all his doubts are now over, because Kardama has very kindly described the different duties of individual souls. Tva sandarshanad eva chinna me sarvasamshayaha yat swayam bhagavan preetya dharmam aha ririkshisho. Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you, for your lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. Wow, so you just meet a saintly person, right? What does Lord Chaitanya say? Sadhu Sangha, Sadhu Sangha. Sarva Shastra Koi, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoi. So one of the common occasions where Srila Prabhupada's referencing a verse without quoting it or giving the specific citation. And he's mentioning it, he's referencing it several times in this purport that all the Shastras say that just a Lava Matra, you meet a saintly person, Prabhupada says one word, resolves all your doubts and gives you liberation. Does that sound good? I think if you go to anybody in the world and say, would you like to have perfect clarity about what to do and not be entangled in anything? I think most people would like that, yeah? So that sounds attractive. People ask me all the time, they ask me to resolve different questions. What should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? One devotee wrote me recently. She said, you know, there's this brahmachari who keeps talking to me and keeps spending time with me and looking at me, and what should I do? I said, well, first make sure that you're at least in sattva gun, and then you can figure it out for yourself. Because Krishna says that when you're in sattva gun, you know what is to be done, what is not to be done, what is binding, what is liberating, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared. So many years ago, I was with my oldest grandson in Tirupati. We had, rented a car, and we were driving up the mountain. We saw Balaji, then we were driving down the mountain. When we went up the mountain, it was very foggy. It was very, very difficult to see. You have to go up slowly anyway to go up the winding hill. There's signs that say, better late than never, on the going up the road. But when we were coming down, it was still looked like it was foggy, and I was thinking, is it actually still foggy? I think the fog has cleared. And I said to the driver, you need to clean your windshield. So he turned on the wipers. It was still foggy. I said, no, the inside of your windshield. And I said, there's a button there. And I actually, being the New Yorker that I am, I actually reached up between the front seats and I pressed the button, which he immediately turned off. And he said, no, that takes petrol. I said, no, 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 no. That's for the AC. We're talking about the heat. The heat is just coming from the engine. You can put it, but he didn't want to do it. So finally I said, pull over. You're not driving any further until you clean off this windshield. And once the windshield was cleaned, then we could see what to do. So everybody is always trying to figure out what to do without cleaning off their windshield. This is the general situation of conditioned souls. What job should I get? Should I get married? Who should I marry? Where should I live? Should I eat this? Should I eat that? Should I do this? Should I do that? From the tiniest decisions, you know, should I go to Walmart today? And to the big decisions, should I marry this person? Everyone's trying to figure out what to do, but they don't want to clean their windshield. And if you clean your windshield, if you have inner clarity, then naturally you know what to do. Isn't that a fact? I mean, that's true for Sattva Gun, what to speak of in Bhakti, where Srila Prabhupada says that our duty becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord. We just immediately know what to do and what not to do. Now, by the way, knowing what to do and what not to do does not mean that everything we do in life will turn out perfectly from an external point of view. Just keep that in mind. People think if I surrender to Krishna, and if I find out what Krishna wants, I get this kind of question too all the time. How do I know what Krishna wants? I have these 3 things I could do. What does Krishna want? And I said, why are you asking this question? Are you thinking that if I could just find out what Krishna wants, then that would be like Krishna's going in front of the chariot of my life with a steamroller, you know, like smoothing out the path? And I said, but actually the devotees who do whatever Krishna wants, sometimes that leads them into great external difficulty. Just like Maharaj Yudhisthira, why did he gamble? He thought, this is what Krishna wants. I have a Kshatriya dharma, correct? I'm not supposed to refuse a challenge. I have the order of the king. Therefore, this is going to please Krishna. And actually, Maharaj Yudhisthira was incapable of making a decision that was not pleasing to Krishna. This is what happened when he said that Draupadi should marry all 5 Pandavas, and his mother said, well, that's a little unusual. It's some histories of that, but it's not common. And Maharaj Yudhisthira said, my mind is incapable of thinking of something sinful. Right? But still, the gambling match was really what led to the war, ostensibly. But who ultimately wanted this war? Krishna. Why? He wants good government. Just like Manu is saying here, the duty of a king. Right? Dharmam aha rivikshayo. The dharma for rivikshayo. The dharma for a king who wants to protect his subjects. Not the dharma for a president or a king who wants to exploit his subjects. We don't have that instruction in how to exploit your subjects. That's not there. So when Krishna sees someone who's apparently a good leader, like Duryodhana, but actually wanted to exploit his subjects, he wanted him removed. And he wanted something dramatic to happen so that people could see that Duryodhana was worthy of being removed. Does that make sense to everybody? Just like our modern politicians, we won't name any names, but you know, our modern politicians, they do many, many things which you would say, oh, definitely they'll be thrown out for this. They do things, right, criminal things. Like, they commit serious crimes, and you think, oh, that's going to be it. You know, they won't be there anymore. And somehow they're still there. And you're like, how is it that you're still there in that position? So sometimes, you know, in the modern day, practically no matter how much is revealed about a politician, they're still in office. But Krishna wanted to have Duryodhana's real mentality revealed. What an, you know, because he was very charitable, for example. He would do lots of things that the citizens enjoyed. So Krishna wanted to show this guy is just pure evil. He's willing to manipulate his cousin into a gambling match. You know, these are the rules of Kshatriya Dharma, so he could steal his kingdom, enslave his brothers, and rape his wife. So people would go, you know, it's not a nice guy. And so Yudhisthira's gambling, of course, had many other purposes also, but it was being done to please Krishna, but it resulted in the Pandavas not having a pleasant life. They were deprived of their kingdom. They were exiled for 13 years. One of those years, they were acting incognito as servants. As Krishna says, for one who's been honored, dishonor is worse than death. So sometimes following Krishna's instructions, or another nice example is Govardhan Lila. So Krishna says to everybody, don't worship Indra, worship Govardhan. And they had a great time. They were having so much fun, offering mountains of food and singing and dancing around the hill, dressing up in their finest clothes. Wow, this was a great festival until the next day. And everybody could understand that the torrential rains were a direct result of their Govardhan worship, which was a direct result of their following Krishna's order. So you follow Krishna's order, your house may get flooded. Your village may get flooded. You may get exiled. Huh? So many times people, they look at religious people and they say, well, I don't want to follow that. If I do that, bad things may happen. So it's not that when we have clarity about what Krishna wants, that means the externals all look pretty to a materialist. That's not what it means. But if I have clarity about what Krishna wants, it means that I will always feel joyful. As Prabhupada says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, one will have life with a thrill, not just for a moment, but at every moment. One will always feel this thrill of connecting with Krishna. And the externals become unimportant. Sampare vipare jivane marane. I'm with you, Krishna, it doesn't matter what's happening. Like a child's, they're being carried by their daddy, you know, and it doesn't matter that it's raining. Right? It just doesn't matter, you know, daddy's carrying me. So it's like that. So we want to have our doubts removed, we want to have our dharma clear, because we want to attain liberation from material miseries, from the false ego. Why? Because then we come to Anandamaya Vyasat. We come to our natural state of joyfulness. And Krishna wants that, and we want that. And that happens whether you're in exile, or whether you're being treated like a servant, or whether you're the emperor. Really, for Yudhisthira, Draupadi, Arjuna, their internal sense of happiness and peace was not affected by whether they were the emperor or whether they were in exile. It really didn't matter to them. And that's what we want to come to. We want to be in sync with the Lord's plans. And that ultimately is what Dharma means. So I want to look at how does knowing our Dharma remove doubts. We have this interesting word, chinaha. You remember in the Prahlad Maharaj story, chindi chindi? And that meant the demons were like piercing him. So Prabhupada's translating this in the word for word as resolved, the word for word in the translation. Our doubts are resolved. What it literally means is they've been cut up. Your doubts have been pulverized. So that's how they've been resolved. So we want to look at how does Dharma remove our doubts and give us clarity, and then also how does knowing our Dharma lead to liberation? Because here Srila Prabhupada's talking about liberation. And then I want to look kind of briefly at what does it mean that the saintly person can give you immediate liberation? You know, because that's often very misunderstood. That people think, well, I'll just, you know, see Srila Prabhupada touch his feet, then boom, I don't have to do anything. I call that magic dust. You know, you're just like, you're hoping if I go to a saintly person, they'll just go, oh, I am liberated. I mean, that can happen, but generally that's not quite the way it works. All right, so I wanted to look at a couple of Bhagavad Gita verses about Dharma giving us clarity. So there's this very interesting statement that Srila Prabhupada has in a purport to Bhagavad Gita 16.5. And you know, chapter 16 is called the divine and demoniac nature. And it's mostly about the demons. First few verses are about divine nature, and then it goes into the demon nature. And so this is the translation, that the transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation. So Prabhupada says something really amazing here in this purport. He says, Arjuna's involvement in the fight was not demoniac because he was considering the pros and cons. He was considering whether respectable persons such as Bhishma and Drona should be killed or not. So he was not acting under the influence of anger, false prestige, or harshness. Now this is significant because Prabhupada sometimes says that without anger you can't be fighting. And so Arjuna had to have some anger. But here he says he was not acting under the influence of anger. So this is a very important point which we could talk about for a whole class, but we're not going to. But we'll just kind of mention it briefly, right? Trividam narikashidam, dwara nashanam atmana, kama krodas tata lobas tasmade tvatvayam tvajet. That at least we have to give up lust, anger, and greed. So many times devotees think, well, I can play around with anger. Because Prabhupada says, you know, you can use anger in Krishna service, and Arjuna had to be angry to fight. But that's transcendental anger, and one has to be very careful about really mundane anger. If it comes into us, which it will sometimes, that's inevitable, we should let it flow through us like rivers into the ocean that's not disturbed. So Arjuna wasn't being impelled by anger, harshness, or false prestige. Very important. Anything we do under the influence, I mean, we all have experience of this, yes? So anything we do under the influence of anger and false prestige and harshness doesn't turn out very good. Yeah? Yeah, okay. All right. Therefore, he was not of the qualities of the demons. So if what's motivating us is false prestige and anger, we're under the quality of the demons. Then he says this really amazing sentence. For a kshatriya, a military man, shooting arrows at the enemy is considered transcendental, and refraining from such duty is demoniac. Doing your duty according to your particular psychophysical nature is considered transcendental. The duty itself is above the modes. Okay, let's look at a nice other quote here from 1810. So the verse here is, the intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work, nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. So here we have this cutting off of doubts, and the Sanskrit is chinna samsayaha. Sound familiar, right? From today's verse we have the same thing, chinna and samsayaha. Here Prabhupada translates chinna as cutting. Purport: a person in Krishna consciousness or in the mode of goodness does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. So that's also, we're not looking at, the results are always going to be pleasing. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activity. So what does it mean to do our dharma? Talking now about our dharma in this world. We each have a particular, what Prabhupada called psychophysical nature. I like to think of it as a kind of vehicle, because Krishna says, Yantra Rudani Maya, we're all in a machine. It's like some of us have a skateboard. When we were driving, I saw this guy on a skateboard. Some of us have a bicycle. Some of us have an electric bicycle, maybe. Some of us have a car. Some of us have a boat. Some of us have a plane. And you can't drive your boat in the sky or your bicycle in the water. You know, it just doesn't work. You can't drive a normal car through a muddy field. We have a particular psychophysical nature that's meant to be in a particular place. Our different duties in this world can be compared, Prabhupada often compares them as such, and in fact Swayambhuva Manu does in the previous verse, to bodily organs. Prabhupada says in one place that we're each a cell in the universal body. So if I'm a brain cell, I don't belong in the lungs, and if I'm a lung cell, I don't belong in the stomach. And if we are in the right place for us, then there is an integrity between our body and our mind and the cosmos and the desire of the Lord. Now you can say, I have this psychophysical body because of my material desires and my karma. Okay, fine. But even that is the will of the Lord. The Lord has set up these laws of karma. And for many of us, I think especially those of us who've taken up some sort of spiritual practice, then some mission of the Lord may also be involved in the particular psychophysical nature that we have. It may not be all due to our karma or all due to our desires. It's probably a mix of those. So we have some particular place that we belong. And when we're in that place, and we'll talk about this a lot more tonight when we talk about career dharma, when we're in that place, naturally, our mind becomes our friend. When we're doing the work that's suited to our nature, our mind is very easy to control. If I'm doing work that's someone else's nature, then my mind is going to give me a lot of trouble. I don't like this work. This is useless. Why am I doing this? It doesn't need to be done. Or why doesn't someone else do this? Why am I doing this? Or I don't like this work. It feels really yucky. Or does anyone care about what I'm doing? You know, our mind will cause us so many problems. One devotee recently was telling me that when she was doing work that wasn't her nature, the only way she could do it was to guilt trip herself into doing it. Well, this is your service, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you've been asked to do, and she had to like flagellate herself constantly in order to do the work. So when we're in our right place, our mind is easily our friend. When we're in the right place, it's easy to be detached from the results of our work, which is a key element of being in the mode of goodness or being transcendental. Krishna says all over the place, do your own work, be detached from the results of your work. Why? When I'm doing my own work, it's like an extension of myself. There's one place where Prabhupada said, when we desire that which is natural, that is desirelessness. That's not a desire. He said, like if a person says, I want to eat, you don't say, what's wrong with you? You want to eat? So, some kind of problem? Because it's natural to eat. So if I say, I want to be who I am, that is not a desire. So if I'm doing the work that's an expression of myself, I'm feeling satisfied by being myself. And therefore it's easy to be detached from the results. Success, failure, how much money I'm getting paid, all these kind of things. It's easy to give that to Krishna, you take the results. And when I'm doing work that's not my nature, then the work itself doesn't satisfy me, and then I become very attached to, then I'm just working, I hate my job and I'm just doing it for the money. It's very difficult then to give it to Krishna. Yes? And when one's doing one's own work, one feels energized, one feels enlivened. In fact, we may lose track of time. It's almost, I mean, even for a materialistic person doing their own work, they enter into kind of a state of samadhi, where they just like, oh, was it lunch? Did I miss lunch? Do I have to go to sleep now? And when you're doing someone else's work, it's just the opposite. When is it going to be over? Can I do something else first? Can I put it off until tomorrow? So you can see how when we do our own work, we naturally end up in the mode of goodness. Or at least there's that ease of doing so. There's that tendency to do so. And when I do my own work with some sense of God consciousness, then I'm naturally going to end up in transcendence. Now, is it possible to do your own work and be in Rajagun or Tamagun? Yes. But you have to work at it a little bit. You have to make kind of an effort to be in the lower modes because your own work is pushing you naturally to be in the right modes. And I was meditating on this a lot for speaking on this verse in purport. Just like Srila Prabhupada says, right, that a liquor shop is in Tamagun, and a city is in Rajagun, and a forest is in Sattvagun, and a temple is transcendent. But one time a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, if we live in the temple, do we make more advancement? And Prabhupada said, that depends on whether or not your mind is on another subject matter. So if when I first joined the Hare Krishna movement, advancement was by geography. If you lived in the temple, you were Uttama. If you lived across the street, then you were Madhyama. And if you lived down the street, you were Kanista. I mean, it was really like that, actually. We really felt like that. But, you can, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, that you can be physically in Radhakund, but be in Narakakund. You can be in hell if your consciousness is demoniac. Right? I mean, there are demons who enter into Krishna's pastimes to cause trouble. And they stay demoniac, most of them. Yes? So even if you're doing your right work and you're in the right place, if your consciousness is demoniac, you will not experience that clarity. But being in the right place really helps to have this clarity. Just like when you're walking through a forest and all you hear is, the stream flowing and the birds chirping and the rustling of the leaves, your mind and your body naturally tend towards at least sattva-gun. Isn't that a fact? And you really got to work hard not to be in sattva-gun, because the whole atmosphere is pushing that way. You can come to a kirtan and be worrying about paying your bills or texting with your ex trying to get them back or something. I mean, you can be doing that, but if you're in the kirtan and you're flowing in the kirtan, you're naturally going to, Srila Rupa Goswami says that even in neophyte, when they come to a festival or in a kirtan, they often get an abhasa of bhava. They'll get a shadow of bhava, even if they're just a beginner. So just being in the right place and knowing our dharma tends to give us mental clarity. It tends to remove our doubts. It tends to pulverize our doubts. What do I do? What do I not do? How do I act? How do I behave? What's right? What's wrong? Now, above that, it actually gives us liberation. When we know what is our proper behavior and we do our proper behavior. Of course, sometimes Prabhupada will say that just knowing it even without doing it can liberate you. Like in Bhagavad Gita 3:31, he says, even if you can't follow everything today, if you just accept it, you're also liberated. So this we're also going to talk about more tonight. So what is it that actually doing your dharma, how does it bring you to liberation? Well, this is doing your dharma completely, not just being in the right place according to your psychophysical nature, but dedicating everything to the Lord, because that's also part of our dharma. Our dharma isn't just, well, I'm suited to be an entrepreneur and I'm working as an entrepreneur. And it isn't even just giving the fruits to Krishna, but it's dedicating everything. It's taking care of my sphere of work as service, maintaining the integrity of my work, seeing that it belongs to Krishna, that all the prosperity I get from my work is a manifestation of Srimati Radharani, a manifestation of Lakshmi Devi, like we call money Lakshmi. Having that mentality, always engaging in yajna, in connection with the Lord, and intentionally trying to work above the modes. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, right, do your own duty, but work above the mode, Nishtraigunya Bhavarjuna. And he's giving him so much advice in the Bhagavad Gita, how to work above the mode. So that's, when we look at Dharma as a whole, which again we'll be looking at this evening, when we look at it as a whole, I'm in the right place, I'm actually trained in how to be in the right place rightly, I'm not getting the results and using them selfishly, I'm giving in charity, I'm sharing my prosperity, my work is honest, I'm adding real value to the society. I actually keep the integrity of my work. I'm connecting with the Lord at least every day, but ideally at every moment. And I'm making an effort to be above the modes. When we have that comprehensive view of Dharma, then one attains liberation. Now here Prabhupada's saying again, the saintly persons can give immediate liberation. And again, mostly people think of this as like Shaktipat initiation. You know what Shaktipat initiation is? Where you just like touch somebody's forehead, and you go, zzz, I am liberated. I actually saw people trying to do that in Trinidad. Should I tell you that story? So I was visiting Trinidad. I was there this was the first time I was there. The devotees invited me to do some preaching. It was on Janmashtami. And they said there's some Hindu group and they want you to come and preach. So we go to this, Hindu group. And they had some murtis there, but they were really odd. The deities they had there they had a deity of Krishna, but he looked really odd. I was like, is that actually Krishna? I don't know. And then they had their priests there were touching people on the forehead, and then the people were like writhing around as if they were having epileptic fits. It was actually kind of scary. And the devotees who had brought me there, they said, we didn't know this was going to happen. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. And I said, no, it'll make a good story for me to tell when I go home. So that's not liberation. In fact, that probably is something demoniac. They're probably dealing with lower entities when they're messing with that kind of thing. Who knows what they're playing with? But that's not what we're talking about. And I'll just tell you frankly that many times devotees in our Hare Krishna movement think like this. Give me blessings, give me blessings. Prabhupada was once approached on a train in India by some young man who came and said, give me blessings, give me blessings. And Prabhupada said, no, you don't want my blessings. They said, yes, please, you're a sadhu, you're a sadhu. So then he pointed to two sannyasis next to him and he said, my blessings is you become like them. And they backed away and they went, they had something else in mind. So the blessings is the instructions, the knowledge, divya gyan, like we're saying, divya gyan hriday prakasita. Here is the path. Prabhupada talks about the pilot receives so much instruction on the ground, but he still has to fly his own plane. It's not that the saintly persons are going to fly our plane for us. Like Prabhupada said, Krishna didn't say, Arjuna, you go to sleep. I'll fight, And it's interesting because Krishna says, it's all arranged already. You're just the instrument. But he didn't say it's all arranged, go to sleep. Wake up in the morning and I'll have fought the battle. Years ago, there used to be a printed magazine, I forget what it was called, Spirit or something, that devotees produced, and in the back of it, it was personal ads. You know what personal ads are? Like looking for a husband or wife. And so people would say, they'd give their qualifications. This is my qualifications. This is what I'm looking for. So one of the men had written that my favorite service is to sleep and dream of Krishna. I thought, I don't think you're going to get a wife like that. So this is not the kind of mercy, not like that. But by the mercy of the saintly persons, the path becomes clear. We know what to do. It should also be said, and this is important, and we'll look at this much more in depth tomorrow, is that it's not mechanical or ritualistic. It's not that you just get, like you want to know how to fix something. My son yesterday was trying to fix one of his children's toys, and so he looked it up on YouTube, how to fix it. It's not that the guru is like that it gives you a mechanical process. And then bye-bye guru, I'll just, do the mechanical process. One does need the mercy of guru. One does need the mercy of saintly persons, and we'll talk about this again much more tomorrow, because this is a personal thing. We're trying to fall in love. We're trying to revive our love for the person Krishna and revive our personal relationship with Krishna. And for that, we need personal grace. We need to please persons. And the process that we're given, and ultimately what Dharma is all about, again, is pleasing Krishna. If we think that it's just a mechanical process, that is actually the view of the demons, who do austerities to please the demigods, thinking, well, I'm going to work out the mechanics so then I can throw them out and rule the world. So if we want to know what to be done and what should not to be done, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating, if we want clarity about the decisions in our life and we want to be free from the material miseries, even if our foot's broken, we're not going to experience it as misery. and will always feel a thrill of connection with Krishna, then we need to follow the Dharma as given by the saintly persons in a way that will please them. And it's not that difficult. It may seem that difficult in 2024, when everybody's in, not everybody, but in general, people are inventing their own ideas of Dharma. Or we're just going to make it up. You know. What's ethical, what's not ethical, we'll just make it up. Whatever we say it is, we'll just have a government by the people, and we'll just vote on what's right and what's wrong. So, you know, it's a little difficult at the present time, but the process itself is not really very difficult. You go to someone who has this clarity, you go to someone who's liberated, and they give you the path by which one also gets clarity and liberation. And by following that path and pleasing them in a personal relationship of love, then we are also properly situated. And that can happen in a moment, where you say, yes, I accept. Yes, I surrender. Now, at least what I see is that the meaning of surrender keeps getting kind of deeper over time. But we surrender as far as in our capacity at that moment. And we're talking also a little bit more about surrender tomorrow. So questions, comments, corrections, additions, subtractions, yes? I can just repeat your question if you want. You got a mic, okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
for such a wonderful class. I'm very inspired by your words. And so much of the lecture really brought up for me that a reminder that we're all kind of spiritual warriors battling through the daily challenges of life. And in the last verse of chapter 4, Tasmat Angyana Sambutam Hritstam Yana Chinatmanaha Samshayam Yogam Atishta Bharata.
You have Samshayam again, yes.
Yeah, stand, may the doubts that have risen in your heart be slashed away by the weapon, or more specifically, the sword of knowledge.
Yes.
And armed with this yoga, stand and fight. He's not saying to avoid the conflict, but in transcendental knowledge of devotional service, do your duty, do your dharma. And
Yes.
thank you for...
Yes, that's another very nice verse that's very much related to today's verse. Do whatever your duty is, which may not be fighting, literally.
Thank you so much.
But to do that with yoga that slashes our doubts. Yes, excellent. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for visiting. It's great to see you and hear you again. Just a quick story, but then that moves into a question. I remember in 1978 when I was living in the 55th Street Temple, there was a apartment building next to the temple. And I was looking at that apartment. There was a devotee living in there. And I said, wow, I feel really bad for that devotee because he's living so far away from the temple. He's not living in the temple. He's living outside. And I really felt bad for him. I was a new devotee, you know.
Yeah.
So then one day I saw that devotee coming out, and he was a householder, and I thought, wow, I hope he can make it to the temple sometime and he can do something for Krishna, you know.
Right.
This was my mentality at the time, you know, of being a new devotee. Then I had to go to the devotee's apartment. I think maybe Adi Keshava asked me to go over there or something. So, okay, so I go into his apartment and and it's beautiful, all these gorgeous deities, and it was like, wow, I felt like I was in the temple room, you know. So, okay, that devotee's name is Yogeshwar Prabhu. So anyway, you know, needless to say, it humbled me, but it gave me a different vision because we were speaking about living in the temple, living a distance from the temple. But wouldn't you say that living in the temple, like living here in this community, I feel a sense of being protected as opposed to even if I lived a couple of blocks away or a mile away or even on the next street. So, living in a temple, would you say it's, I don't want to say
It's
more
living,
conducive?
is living in
but-
a temple, you know, when we first were there, we had an apartment on 57th Street.
You were on 50, so
We
you
were
were
on
even further away.
57th. We were even further away
Oh
than
my
Yogeshwar,
goodness.
yeah.
More Maya, okay.
Yeah. We had to get up just a little bit earlier to make it to Mangalarti because we had to walk to the temple.
Yeah, it seems like
But then we moved into the temple. We did end up living in the 55th Street temple also. We lived on the 9th floor. Yeah, first we had the apartment on the 9th floor, and then we had two of the rooms on the 9th floor. Well, was it nicer living in the temple? Sure, then you could just take the elevator when it worked down to see Radha Govinda. But the negative side there of living in the especially when we had the two little rooms, was I would clean the communal bathroom because no one else would clean the communal bathroom. I still have a scar here from the staph infection I got cleaning that bathroom. So in one sense, when we had our own apartment on 57th Street, I could keep it cleaner than I could when I had to live in the 55th Street temple. But it was really nice when the little Radha Govinda deities, were you there when when Tamal Krishna Maharaj arranged for them to go throughout the building every Monday night?
That was 76?
78, 79, like that,
Is that
yeah.
later on?
Yeah.
I might have been on shopping.
Yeah, well, we were also there in 76 when Prabhupada was there. Is it nice to live in a temple? Of course it is. Of course it is. But I would ask you, if we spread Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement all over the world, would everybody live in the temple? No. So I was just recently in Bali, and Bali is primarily Hindu. I mean, it's a funny kind of Hindu. They're not Indians, by the way. They're Pacific Islanders, and their Hinduism is a little different. But putting that aside, in front of almost every house there's an altar. And inside almost every house there's an altar. Practically every house is a temple. And not only that, there was a public temple every block, sometimes two per block. So every house has an altar outside and inside, and every block there's one or two temples. Now, their Hinduism, again, it's a little funny. That's true. But that's what I see as an ideal society. If we had, once we spread Mahaprabhu's movement throughout Los Angeles, every house would be a temple, and we'd have a temple on every block. And then living in Los Angeles would be like living in a temple for most of the people here. But yes, do those of you who live here in the ashram and in the temple or in the community have an advantage? Yes! Of course you do. Now, what people who live outside do is they do what you were seeing. They make their home into a temple. They bring the temple into their home. So then they can create that same atmosphere, and then they can have that same advantage. But is there an advantage? Of course there's an advantage. Without any doubt, there's an advantage. I'm very fortunate that when I got stuck, you know, like in musical chairs when there's no chair, when COVID hit, I was stuck in North Carolina with no chair. And the temple kindly, after some months of my staying with friends, the temple kindly gave me a place in the ashram. So it's really nice. I mean, it's a 30-second walk from where I stay to the deities. That's really nice. Definitely. Yes. But that doesn't mean that anyone who lives off the property is in Maya and everyone who lives on the property is Krishna conscious. That's a big mistake. So is it an advantage? Definitely. Like, is it an advantage to be in a place with a lot of natural beauty? Prabhupada sometimes talks about those as spiritual opulences. You know, if there's flowers and plants and clean air and water, is that an advantage? Of course it is. But if you're preaching in some hellish city, because you're preaching Mahaprabhu's movement, I mean, we find Narada Muni, you know, why didn't he see the Lord again? What was his contamination? So Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas say his contamination was he was attached to living in the beautiful places in the forest. He was attached to sattva gun, which is still a contamination. So. And one shouldn't think, well, I live in the temple, so I don't have to work as hard at my own consciousness or my own false ego. But of course, it's an advantage. Yes, and this will be the last one.
It's an interesting topic for discussion. I was reading a quote the other day that said that up until the point that Srila Prabhupada decided to take up the order of his spiritual master and preach, he never lived in a temple.
No, he didn't.
He met Bhaktisiddhanta not more than 10 times. And when he joined, everyone was pushing him, okay, all the sannyasi disciples, he can manage this temple. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, no, let him live outside, and one day when will come when he will
do something wonderful, yes. Yeah. And of course, this is a long story, but when Prabhupada took Vanaprastha, he tried to live in a temple and it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work. They didn't want him. He was very politely thrown out. He said, I can arrange to get 800 copies of our magazine printed for the same price as 400. And plus, I only have 2 dhotis and they have holes and they're not suitable for preaching. Can I please get 2 dhotis? And the head of the mutt, who was out of town at that time, wrote back and said, you're simply causing a disturbance to the brahmacharis by pushing them all to preach. And if we print 800 copies, then it will be a burden for us to distribute them. And we can't afford to get you 2 new dhotis. I've heard there's a parikrama going on now in Vrindavan. Maybe you'd like to join that. So that was the very polite, civilized way of saying, get out. And then Prabhupada lived for like 4.5, 5 years without any fixed residence at all. I mean, then he did live in the Radha Damodar temple. I think that was the only time that we could say that Srila Prabhupada lived in a temple. Was like those another 4 or 5 years that he lived in the Radha Damodar temple. But yeah. And Prabhupada would criticize, godbrothers of his who lived in the temple and just would show the deity and take the money out of the donation box for eating and sleeping and not be active preachers. So, better those who were living outside and preaching. But do you have an advantage? Oh, for sure. It's a huge advantage. Yes. Okay, we should end now. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.